let's get back into it. See if we can get through all this today. All right, so we talked about infantile amnesia. This is remembering your own past is called autobiographical memories. So just like an autobiography, it's about yourself. So your memories are about yourself, autobiographical memories. We do not store these well in childhood, so everybody has some level of infantile amnesia. One theory is that they may not have enough space in their working memories, basically their short-term memory, to be able to store all the information. Or they can't hold multiple pieces of information needed at one time in order to consolidate a complete memory. So many times if you do have memories from your childhood, they're more like glimpses of it. There might be like a picture of it, or maybe you remember a sound or a smell or something like that, but you don't have a full and complete memory. And that may be because your short-term memory just has not developed very well. You can't hold a lot of pieces of information all at one time. We also don't have good language skills, and we do know, like I said before, as you develop your verbal language capacity, your memory also grows. It seems to stimulate memory development. And in general, early memories are unstable. You are likely to lose them. This is also something important to remember if you are using a child or an eyewitness in some sort of case, that it has to be taken with a grain of salt. Like you couldn't convict somebody on a 2-year-old's testimony.
Solely
Like
on
the
this.
Martin,
Yeah.
Martin preschool case, like that?
Right, exactly.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And this is something that we have learned over the years, that you can't trust the memory of a child. Now, it could be one piece of information in an entire case, but a court, it would not be legal to convict somebody just on that. So another thing that happens is we develop scripts, also called general event representations. So how do we describe an event? So we all, like if I tell you to describe your 4th of July, then we all have like a script of how we would describe an event. So we would say where we went, who we went with, what we did. Like we all know there's certain pieces that you cover. And as we develop, even as young as 3 years old, we have this script of how we should describe an event. Now, younger children tend to be more general in what they describe instead of exact occurrences. Like they don't tell the details of the event. They just tell it in general, which of course can be problematic if it is a court case. And sometimes children can add in like imaginary things because it's what was going on in their head, because this is a very imaginatory time of life. So they'll often talk about something that they imagined just as clearly as the thing that actually happened, because to them it was kind of real. So we have to remember that in that age, the mind is working differently. So when they describe something, we have to keep in mind how different their cognition is and how it may represent the event differently than it actually happened. And a lot of times when children are interviewed for crimes, they're asked to draw a picture out, because many times there's more details in a drawn than in what they verbally tell. Which is also why we have art therapy for kids. Interestingly enough, these scripts will also affect their memory for future events as much as their memory for past events. So the way we describe things also help us to remember them in a similar way. So for instance, if you have been taught that when you describe something, you need to really describe the physical part of it, like what was a person wearing? Maybe you were raised, I don't know, by fashion designers or something. So your parents always wanted to know what was the person wearing. Well, then you're more likely in the future to pay attention to what you know is required in your script. If you were raised by police officers, you may have been taught to really pay attention to small details because that's what's important to them. And so in future events, you will try to look for the information in order to fill out a future script. Does that make sense? So however you're trained to report is how you're also trained to pay attention in the future. Okay, children can, this is important, children can be good eyewitnesses. They can accurately recall something. But the most important thing is how you question them. And this is the key. If somebody questions badly, if they have biased questions, if they have leading questions, if they supply words for the kid to describe something, then that child's memory begins to alter. And eventually, they will remember exactly what you were pushing them to remember in the first place. And that can be really dangerous. That's why child eyewitness testimony is so dangerous. There's been so many cases of children remembering abuse, or back in the 80s, there was a big scandal about like satanic cults and molesting children and sacrificing children. Other children remembered seeing children sacrificed. It was craziness. Look up some of the stuff from back then. It was really...
That wasn't McMartin.
Yeah, yes. And what they eventually found is that the person interviewing these kids was pushing them to remember these details. Did you see a child get sacrificed? And of course, kids want to please, usually they want to please adults, and so they'll start trying to convince themselves that they remembered what the adult wants them to see, and then all of a sudden they have these full memories of being part of a satanic child sacrifice ritual. Okay. Which is insane. Like one little girl remembered her stomach being cut open and then taking the intestines out and doing something with them and then sewing her back up. And of course she had 0 scars on her body, but she swore she remembered it. But it's because, and this can happen with adults too. You can be pushed into having false memories. It happens. There's been many people who have pled guilty to a crime, even like murder, that they didn't do. And they convince themselves that they remember this happening.
Would that have effects on those kids? You know, having
Oh,
them
yeah.
believe that they had those memories?
Yeah, totally. It definitely could.
Finding out they didn't.
Depends on how well they remember it later on, but yeah, for sure. I mean, if you can convince yourself that you were part of a satanic cult and you saw children sacrificed or your own self experimented on, and it feels like it's a real memory. I mean, false memories can be just as real as a real memory. That could be very traumatizing. So the interviewers ended up traumatizing these kids. It wasn't their parents. And of course, so many parents got arrested and children taken away, and
People lost their business, never recovered
it
from
was
it.
crazy. It was like a witch hunt back in the 80s. If we were still burning people at the stake, there would have been people burned at the stake. Yeah, it's crazy time period. 80s was crazy. Those side ponytails just made everybody lose their mind. Love them. So this is what I was just saying. Children's memory of past events can be affected by prompting, directed questions, and repeated questioning. And there's actually a great video. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
You don't like the side pony, huh?
I have to pretend I do because my niece is all into side ponies. So like, can you give me a side pony? I'm like, God, no. At least she's not using a scrunchie. There's a line that you can't cross there. No scrunchies. Let's see. Let's see. What was that kid's name? Where is it? Dang it. I'm trying to find the video. Oh, here it is. There we go. Michael Crow. Oh, that's way too long. Come on, short version. Oh, there's a good one.
Criminal investigation. A suspect might lie or tell the truth. They may be innocent or guilty. Interrogation is a high-stakes game. Too much pressure, and an innocent person might confess to a crime they didn't commit.
Most people like to think that there is no such thing as a false confession, that someone never confessed to the crime they didn't commit. They themselves believe that they never could be forced to confess to something they didn't really do. The evidence shows, under the right conditions, people will make false confessions.
In January 1988, a 12-year-old girl, Stephanie Crow, was killed in her own bedroom in the middle of the night. Her brother, Michael Crow, was interrogated by the police. They believed he had killed his sister. He was interrogated and eventually admitted to the crime.
I have this overwhelming feeling that he killed her, but...
Okay, let's hear it. Let me hear it out.
Let me hear about it. Why I feel that way. Let me hear about it. All I know is for some reason I can tell I felt it.
He was charged with Stephanie Crow's murder. Problem was, the confession was false.
You said the last time you saw John.
So why would someone risk ruining the rest of their life by confessing to a crime they didn't commit?
Most people have the perception that a police interrogation is a highly intense, very emotional, confrontational type of interview. But in fact, the more productive interview is not of that form. More often than not, an interrogator who's using the accusatory style has already developed a preconception before he comes to the interview room. And what he does is uses that narrow vision and begins to attack his subject.
There has to be an explanation. I don't know.
The interrogation of Michael Crow was highly coercive and confrontational.
Just tell us what happened. You keep asking me questions I can't answer. What do you want me to do?
Michael Crow's 14 years old, and he's recently learned that his sister, who he loves dearly, is dead.
I haven't liked you.
He's told them repeatedly he didn't do this. They keep accusing him. They've been in this room with him for many hours.
I like you.
The detective tells Crow he has a choice of two paths. If he doesn't confess, he'll be punished in an adult prison. If he does confess, he will get help. This is a lie.
There's two paths to travel. There's the path of punishment, or there's the path that says, hey, I'm sorry for what I did.
There's the path toward rehabilitation. If he makes the confession they're looking for, that he killed his sister.
We need to go down a path where we're going to help you work this problem out.
And his repentance will mean that he's not criminally charged or punished. If he doesn't, then he will go to a hardcore juvenile prison.
This two paths lie is an attempt to force Crow into confessing to the murder of his sister. Lies used in this highly coercive manner increase the risk of a suspect making a false confession. Another common tactic used in coercive interrogations is a sustained attack on a suspect's memory.
I don't remember what I did. I tried to tell you. You say I did it.
He's trying to tell them he has no memory, but they've beaten him down. He's crying. They're accusing him of selective memory.
I don't know.
And they're just coming back at him relentlessly.
I can't remember means I can't remember. I can't remember selectively is a little bit different.
And here they're trying to explain to him how he could have done this in the absence of having any memory, because he keeps saying, I didn't do it, I don't have any memory of this.
I think there's two parts to Michael.
There's a good Michael and there's a bad Michael. And the good Michael would never hurt or kill his sister. The bad Michael did it out of conscious awareness.
You're right, it's unconscious, but if I'm the good Michael right now, then the other is completely submerged. I can't remember.
What's really going on, though, here is that this is nothing short of child abuse. And he's having a breakdown. He's crying. He is psychologically tortured. This is a painful scene to watch. This is an egregious interrogation, absolutely awful interrogation.
The detective's highly coercive methods used during a 10-hour interrogation finally wear Crow down. He confesses to a crime he didn't commit.
Alright. What to learn?
Fortunately for Michael Crow, evidence was found that exonerated him for the murder of his sister.
Poor baby.
Right? Crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Right, so we talk about how children's memories can be manipulated, but it's not just children. Children are, I think it's easier to do this to children, but you can do it pretty easily to an adult. I mean, it took 10 minutes or 10 hours for a 14-year-old to decide he murdered his sister even when he hadn't. It takes relatively the same amount of time to do that to an adult. And there's been many cases when the cops have coerced somebody into a false confession. And it's interesting because when you talk to or listen to an interview of somebody who has falsely confessed, they say that they've just been beaten down so much mentally. They're usually not given food or water. That's always also a bad method of interrogation. So they're really hungry, they're really thirsty, their brain isn't working well, they feel like they're in a fog, and they'll basically just start believing anything. This is also what cults do to people in order to reprogram and brainwash them. Just get them into this isolated state where you can disconnect people from reality, and it's really easy to disconnect humans from reality. Just think, how many of you have been sitting in your car at a stoplight, and the car next to you rolls back, and you all of a sudden slam on the brakes because you think you're moving forward? I mean, it's that easy to trick your brain. So we can manipulate you into thinking all sorts of things, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to not allow yourself to become isolated from people who are stable around you. Something abusers do also to beat you down psychologically. They want to isolate you. They move you away from your friends. They alienate all your friends, and people stop wanting to come around anymore. And now they've got you right where they want you, and they can manipulate you, because the human brain is really easy to manipulate. Okay? So that's something that's important to remember for children and anybody else, is that if you ask questions the wrong way, then it's very easy to get people to change their past memories, to give them false memories. A very simple thing to do. As a matter of fact, there was one experiment where they showed a red car pulling up to a stop sign, and another car blew through the other sign in front of them. And they called the people back. I think it was a month later. They called them in, and they said, do you remember whether or not the red car stopped at the yield sign before the other car went through the intersection? And they said, yes, they stopped first. And then they called them in again and said, did they stop at a stop sign or a yield sign? And people said, yield sign. And it was a stop sign. But simply because the question was phrased, did the car stop at a yield sign first?
Yeah.
They remembered distinctly seeing a yield sign. It was not a stop sign. They remember seeing a yield sign. And so that easily, they gave the people false memories. It was that easy. Just one misstatement, and it completely changed their memory of what they had seen. That's how easy it is to do. So that's why you have to be really careful about interrogating people, and particularly children, because they're even more impressionable. All right. I think we've talked about most of this stuff already. Okay. So let's go into teenagers. So remember, the older the child is the better they're getting at memory. So their elaboration strategies start to increase, start to get better, more efficient. Since it's how do I make connections with what I've learned, and then of course that continues into the college age, and usually it levels out after that, because education isn't super important after college for most people. But they learn more strategies that are especially relevant to school learning, how to take notes, right? You learn the Cornell notes or whatever sort of thing. I hated those. Yeah. I just took bad grades in classes that were hard. I'm like, I'm not doing these notes. It's just stupid.
And why do you think they're stupid?
Because, well, I didn't feel like they were stupid in general, but I felt like it was stupid for me. I already had a note-taking system that worked for me, and so why do I need to change what is working well for me to something else? And I'm a brat, so I'm like, screw you, give me a bad grade. I'll go higher up, I'll even sue you. 6 years old.
6 years old.
Okay, so we become better. Here's another thing. We become better at ignoring the irrelevant, right? Which is really important. You can only focus on 7 to 9 items. If you're focusing on irrelevant information, now you have significantly impacted your thinking ability. And this is why kids with ADHD struggle so much, because that filter between sensory and short-term memory doesn't work very well, and it basically allows anything to get through. And so you're always focusing on like the newest thing, or so whatever grabs your attention gets shuttled into short-term memory.
So what is the Ritalin doing for an ADHD child?
Oh, I teach a lot about this in abnormal psychology. Ritalin is an amphetamine, so you're basically giving your kids speed. And what they believe that does is it's increasing dopamine release and making them more able to focus on what's going on, because if it's interesting, your brain thinks it's important. So you're falsely making your child interested in something.
Is that the same thing as Adderall?
Yeah,
Yes,
but that's
Adderall,
meth.
Basically, huh?
Isn't that traces of meth in it instead of speed for Adderall?
Well, methamphetamine is speed. But it's not exactly methamphetamine, but it is an amphetamine. So does the same thing, it's just a slightly different chemical structure from street speed.
So can the kid come off of it eventually, ever, or?
Yes, but it is addictive, which is
Yeah.
also why some kids sell it for recreational use. And just like if your kid was taking speed, it changes the wiring of the neurological system. So I know there are some people that it has been very helpful to, so I'm not making a blanket statement that it's bad, but if it was my child, I would just work really hard on developing their ability to
I
focus.
can tell though,
Yeah.
with the kids who aren't taking
Oh, sure, it
meds,
works. Yeah, it
they come
absolutely
in,
works.
They're just totally different kids.
It does work.
In a good way or in a bad way? Disruptive and
Yeah.
non-attentive, just.
But one of the theories from people who are against the use of these drugs for ADHD is that you basically have bored and tired children. And so they can't sit still and they can't focus. And so they're maybe so tired from staying up all night that when they get to school, they're just like fidgety and their brain's all over the place and they can't focus. I mean, think about if you're trying to stay awake in a class, which some of you are right now, what do you start doing? You start like moving around, wake up, you start becoming fidgety, which is a sign of attention deficit disorder, but you're just tired, right? And then if you're bored, you also start doing the same things. And you have a hard time focusing on the information, and you start noticing irrelevant information. So is there a biological cause for ADHD? Probably. I mean, lack of sleep, poor nutrition, too much sugar, and possibly just a natural predisposition towards low dopamine, which helps you to focus, could be causing this. Now, is the proper treatment to just give supplemental dopamine? I personally don't think so, because if you know about long-term drug use, starts building tolerance, starts destroying receptors, and long-term you may be causing permanent damage. Whereas on the other hand, like my oldest sister, the memory one, she had terrible ADHD. She was a demon child. Because when she was born, she got meningitis, and that caused all sorts of issues for her neurologically. And my parents did not believe in ADHD medicine, and what they believed in is you sit your butt back down and you do your homework. And I don't care how long it takes you, I don't care how many times I tell you to sit back down and focus, you will do it. And it was a struggle. She took 12 years to get through college, but now she's got 2 master's degrees, and she did those completely on her own. But I always say that I should have all the same degrees she had, because I helped her through school so much. But it was a lot of holding her hand, you need to focus, no, get back on track, pay attention, and eventually her filter system was developed enough, it was trained enough for her to be able to concentrate on her own, and finally by the time she got to graduate school, she could do her work without me being there with her. I don't know why it was always me. She's like, Serena, I need your help.
That's me with my younger sister.
Similar.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I have ADHD bad.
So yeah, for some reason in our society, because we have this, like we have to be nice to everybody, not make anybody feel bad. If a child has ADHD, we go, oh, we need to make an exception for this kid. When really what it is, oh, we need to be harder on this kid. This kid needs more attention. They need more tutoring. They need more, they need to be forced to study and focus even more than a normal kid. They need extra help. They shouldn't be allowed to just be given this exception. They need extra.
See, and then you go to the environmental factors, because I always
Oh,
think
yes,
about when my
absolutely.
kids are sitting in the classroom, they're misbehaving, they're ADHD, and they need to take the meds or whatever, and think what leads them to have to take meds. Their parents are working. They don't have time to
Yeah, it's a huge.
work with
Your
them.
parents are divorcing, you're going to have ADHD.
My mom was never around. She was always at work.
Yeah.
At work.
So we're sort of saying that this is an individual, like this child has ADHD, but in reality, the system is giving the child ADHD. So should we be treating the child and with really powerful drugs that could cause long-term damage, or should we be trying to change the system that they're part of?
Also, one of the effects that happen after someone uses Adderall for so long is once they stop using it, they end up finding themselves to be extremely drowsy all the time.
Yeah, because their whole neurological system has been used to this high level of drugs, and now just like a tweaker, you take their drugs away and they can't function anymore. They needed that.
That's not a lasting effect, though.
It can be. I mean, amphetamines are very destructive to the neurological system. That's why we have tweakers. I mean, you can pick, if you're familiar with methamphetamine use, you can pick up a tweaker from a mile away. And their brain is fried. It doesn't matter how long they've been off drugs, you can tell they use methamphetamines. Ritalin is not as powerful as street speed, but it's still doing a lower level damage that methamphetamines are doing. So, is there a situation where a child may just have to have that? Possibly. If it was my kid, I still wouldn't do it.
As a child, my mom never knew what ADHD was. She thought I was just a bad kid.
Right. We
causing
used to just have
trouble for
brats,
her.
and they got a big whooping, and they were told to sit down and focus,
Yeah, I got
and then they grew up just fine.
So I got thick skin.
Right.
So I took Adderall as an adult, not as a child,
Mhm.
but as an adult, but not for long. But I did notice some changes. It kind of gave me insomnia, so I had to like change my work schedule
It's an upper
to like
stimulant.
graveyard shift, and I would like sleep during the
Yeah, and
day.
so many kids, you start the day with an upper, then the day has to end with a sleep medication to get them to sleep, and then they're also drowsy, so you have to give them like Provigil or something to give them better attention span. And I mean, it's just.
Well, these kids who are taking ADHD medication
I
are
guarantee
also
they're taking other
a
stuff. They're probably
sleeping
taking anti-anxiety, antidepressant, they might be on antipsychotics. I mean, I worked at a residential treatment center for elementary school age kids, and the average kid was on 6 different psychotropic medications. Drug for everything. It's insane.
We're
Yeah.
very
But
medication
I could
heavy.
just sit
Yeah.
down with the kid, you know.
Well, that's the environment that will allow you to sit down.
Because it was
because they're
basically
always
like an orphanage sort of thing. These were kids who had been taken away
Now
from
that
their
I'm
families.
understanding this, I don't blame my mom so much. I guess. She
Yeah.
Well, you helped her work through her problems.
Yeah. The bill will be in the mail after. All right. Okay, so teenagers also get quicker at their thinking processes. They can think things through faster in their brain, which is, of course, also why IQ continues to increase into teenage years. And memory, you can store more information if you're going through the information faster. So that memory continues to increase. And then, of course, the brain is physically maturing. That allows all of these processes to occur. Now, after teenage years, basically, that's the end of maturing. We don't have any more huge growth spurts of the brain. It maybe continues to mature into the 20s a bit, but after that, sort of like your brain is developed. Not that you can't continue to affect the brain, but you're not going to have real maturation occurring after that. Just like you don't get taller after a certain age, although you can certainly get wider if you eat too many carbs or whatever. Okay. Now the knowledge base also is continuing to expand the meta memory, all these things that we see in childhood. It's just continuing into adolescence, but getting better and more efficient. You start seeing reading strategy change in teenage years. So you go from studying to skimming. We get really good at skimming through material and being able to comprehend it. Skimming is like God's gift to the academic world. If you can't skim your books and comprehend, then you're going to really struggle in school. In my doctorate, I remember the worst quarter we had, I counted how many pages all my classes assigned per week, and we were on average, we were being assigned 500 pages of reading a week, which is impossible. Like, just because you're getting a doctorate does not mean you can read any faster or there's any more hours in the week.
I
So-
start laughing and go crazy, like, are you serious?
Right? But they don't care. It's a doctorate. So if you can't handle it, there's the door. You can quit anytime you want. We don't care. So you have to be able to read really fast, know what's important, pick out the important information, and of course retain it as well. So you get better and better at skimming. So I don't think that you need to read every single thing in detail. Now in college, I mean, the amount of pages you guys are reading is doable, but of course I've been there. I know it's difficult. It's a lot of reading. But you should go through and you should pick out the important information first. Do the skimming first, and then you can go back in and flesh out all those details. Okay. Let's see. Anything else that's this is an interesting thing. So we see a gender difference between girls and boys with their memory. So girls are more likely to use metacognitive strategies than boys. So boys sort of just like, power through memory, and girls are like more sophisticated about like how we use memory strategies. So you're more likely to see boys when they sit down and study to just sort of use repetition and try to, I don't know, I'm a girl, so it's hard to explain exactly how boys are doing it. Girls are more likely to sit down and say, let's come up with like all the abbreviation, like orangutans always play with little gorillas. Girls are more likely to, it's probably a girl that came up with that. Not that boys don't sometimes use it, but there's less often. And it's probably just because their brain is set up differently than ours. It may, because boys have just as good of memories as girls. So it may just be that they don't need those strategies in order for their brain to retain information, whereas
power through.
you can power through, like so many other, like opening a jar. You don't need sophistication to open that. I have to go manipulate somebody into opening it for me, okay? Or go find a butter knife and bang the crap out of it for 10 minutes for it to finally open. And how many boys have ever banged a jar with a knife to get it to open?
I've actually done that, but it was stuck with something else.
It was stuck with something else, okay. How many girls can open a brand new jar without a butter knife? Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Tap it on the floor.
Tap it on the floor, okay,
Yeah.
she's using something else. Yeah.
Run it under hot water. It'll start to loosen it up.
Yeah.
Or I'll get a couple rubber bands to help me grip it better.
Oh, smart. See, this is what I'm saying. Girls have to get more sophisticated about things because they can't power through as well as boys can. So I don't know. It's just the brain works differently. So those types of strategies work better for girls and guys. So it may be that's why.
And it goes for height too.
For a height?
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
It goes the same. The same thing goes for height, like for
Height.
shorter people.
Yeah, shorter people have to use more sophisticated strategies. Yeah, because we can't reach things. Yes. Okay. Now the other thing we see is that the higher SES background, so it's that socioeconomic status, the more metacognitive strategies are used as well. So possibly, I mean, there's a lot of possible explanations for this. Maybe if you're from a higher SES background, there's more educational demand on you, so you then come up with more strategies of how to learn. It could be that you are being taught those strategies more in the first place, and so, of course, you're more used to thinking about metacognitive strategies. So there could be a lot of variables. Could also be that because you may be healthier, and so your brain is able to come up with that more than low SES. And probably the truth is it's all of those.
Yeah.
So.
Self-taught. Teach yourself something.
Yeah, if you're from a lower SES background, then chances are you're on your own. You either figure it out or you don't. Whereas higher SES, there's more resources, generally speaking. I mean, there's exceptions on both sides, but.
That's what I'll be to my kids.
I mean, I grew up poor, but I also grew up with a mom who had a PhD. So even though we were low SES, obviously I still had advantages over other kids in Rialto. Although all my friends benefited from it too, because they come over and ask my mom to teach them how to do stuff. All right, which is probably why most of my friends, even though they grew up dirt poor, all have master's degrees or doctorates.
Seriously.
It's amazing looking back at some of these kids, like you never succeed in life. I remember once we dropped off a friend. She lived in San Bernardino, so I don't know how she went to school in Rialto, but she literally lived on the other side of these railroad tracks. It was just like so classic, wrong side of track story. And I've never seen somebody as poor. It was practically like she was living in a shed. It was dirty, filthy. It was horrifying. And then she had, by the time she finished her bachelor's, she had 5 kids from 5 different fathers. And she's got a master's degree now. She can support all 5 of those kids. So it's amazing that, yeah.
In what?
I think she's doing social work, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Talk about preservation.
Right? Yeah, she definitely had some protective factors that helped her through that. The school system in Rialto was pretty good when we went there. And then I think being friends with my family probably helped her too, knowing people. I mean, just your friend's mom has a PhD and your dad's literally a rocket scientist. That changes your perspective on life. So, yeah.
My ex-boyfriend, his dad is a doctor. That gave me a lot of encouragement.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And he was a taxi driver without a citizenship.
And then became a doctor? Yeah, see, that's an amazing story. So if you have people, even though it's not your own parents, if you have people in your life that accomplish things, yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, just because you're poor, you grew up in a bad area, you've got horrible parents, it does not mean you're screwed for life. There's a lot of ways that you can be protected, like a good teacher.
I always tell my kids too, I say, this is not your life. You guys are, whatever you go home to, it's not your life. Your life is made right here, right now,
Yep.
and then you make it when you're 18. that's the life that you make for yourself.
Yeah.
So that they can kind of disconnect their, you know, from what
Yeah,
they're
they're not
being brought up in. See, because we're right next door, we're in Montana.
Oh, okay,
So,
yeah,
you know, we're in that,
that area.
yeah.
Yep, I get it. I'm glad I grew up in Rialto, Montana. I'm very glad I didn't grow up in San Bernardino. That's where you grew up, right? Yeah. Rialto, all the criminals lived there, but they had this, I don't know, they had a philosophy that you don't crap in your own backyard. Yeah, so they would leave. They'd go to San Bernardino and commit a crime, and then they came back and lived in Rialto. Yeah, so. Most of the time. I mean, there were crimes. Yeah. Rialto was one of the safest places to live, while San Bernardino, right next door, was the murder capital of the world. So, yeah.
It ended up getting to a point to where the place that they call Little Africa had like executions almost every single day.
Yep. There's a neighborhood called Little Africa, and in San Bernardino. Yeah. And then there's that apartment complex. What do they call it? The zoo. Yeah. Because my dad's a cop in San Bernardino City, so you might have had issues with him. I don't know. Or your friends did. But if you're called to the zoo, you don't go without backup. That's one of the. I mean, Rialto had places like that too, like the Jackson Street apartments. If you're familiar with Rialto, if you don't go down Jackson Street without backup, the cops won't go down there at all. My aunt lived on Jackson Street, so.
Oh my
My
goodness.
parents let us spend the day. There'd be some nights you put the kid in the bathtub so that stray bullets don't hit him, and my parents still let us spend the night. I don't know.
Wow.
You just get used to what you're living in, you know. Okay. What is new on this? So, okay, we're talking about adults now. So obviously, adults are functioning best cognitively, but they function best in the areas in which they have expertise. Just like what we talked about with formal operational thought and what you specialize in, like the political science majors have the most formal operational thinking in political science. So whatever you start to specialize in, you become really good. So that's why we have the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. So if you are good at everything, you're not great at any one thing. You can only specialize in a few, one or maybe two or three things.
My sister used to tell me, oh, you're good at everything, I'm good at nothing. And now look at her, she's good at makeup now, and I'm like, yeah, with makeup.
Well, this is why I think it's so important that parents, I wish the school system would do this too, but would try to figure out what kids were really good at. I mean, the general grounded education is wonderful. I think it's really important, but we don't focus enough on trying to find out what is your skill, what is your talent, because we're all naturally, genetically more capable at certain things.
It doesn't have to be college, right? It doesn't have to be
No,
college.
it doesn't.
could be
No, I think there's many students in college that shouldn't be wasting their time and money, and my time and taxpayer money.
Right.
I pay my own income with my own taxes. So, you know, so I have a friend who, straight out of high school, he got a job at a tire company, and now he manages 6 tire companies and is making, you know, he's making 6 figures. I think he's making $200,000 a year. And that's without even, no, he does have a high school diploma. He doesn't have a college. Never took a single college class. And he's great at it. He loves it. He's happy. Awesome. Plumbers if you're a master plumber, you make really good money doing that. So there's some people, like if you're in music or art, you don't necessarily need a college degree. As a matter of fact, it might be wasting your time. You'd be better off spending all that time and money getting private lessons from some great somewhere, and working on getting your art into a gallery or getting hired by a concert hall.
So there's something that I would think that you would know. You've got all these great videos. I just remember seeing it a while back in another country, European country, where their kids go to school. They do have the basic classes, but then for the second part of the day, they go into their auto mechanic or hairdressing. It's like a big mall of places where they go to take their...
Yeah, in Europe, I mean not every European country, but in general, they have a system where by your junior year of high school, you either test into vocational level schools, like vocational, technical, or academic type of schools. So you'll separate which schools you go to, or at least what departments on campus you go to.
Well, it wasn't a test that separated them though. It's what they wanted to do. You know,
that hasn't been my experience.
What they were interested in.
Yeah, I mean,
don't
that's
know
part
what
of it, but
country it was. But.
Yeah, probably Scandinavia, I would guess, somewhere in Denmark or something. But in general, like I lived in Ireland for a few years, and you take a test at the end of sophomore year, and that determines where you go. and you can fight it, but you have a limited choice about whether you go a vocational route or an academic route, and I don't agree with that. I think everybody should be academically, if you're going to be a plumber, great, but you should at least get a high school level academic education. So I didn't like that, and I also didn't like that the universities, there's no general education, it's just your specialty. So you go to school for 2 years, basically, and you do your core degree, and that's it. And in my experience talking to Europeans, I mean, Scandinavian Europeans are a bit better, but in general, like France, Ireland, England, I don't feel they're as well educated as us. Scandinavia, they're up to high school, it's almost like our college. They've got really good school systems. But France particularly, I don't like the French education system at all. You pass based on your average grade. First of all, I think you only have to have a 60% to pass, so you pass with a D. And then it's not just 60% in one class, it's the average of all your classes.
Wow.
So if you ace PE, then that could average out your calculus grade, and now you pass. And that, yeah, it's just ridiculous. When I tell them, like, you have to be considered to have a good grade, you have to have a 90%, they're shocked. 90%? How could you get that? You studied? I don't know, I don't understand the question. What do you mean, how do you get that? Yeah. Okay, so see what else about adults. In general, we say it takes 10 years studying something to become an expert at it. So I feel like when I played my flute, it took me 10 years to become really good at the flute. 10 years of studying language, you are really perfectly fluent, and beyond just like general conversation, you got the technical words down and all that. So just remember, don't be discouraged. It takes 10 years to be an expert at anything you put your mind to.
10,000 hour rule, right?
Yeah, about 10,000 hours, yeah. Although, to be more of an expert than the average person, the saying is you have to read 3 books, and you're more of an expert than the majority of people. So, again, don't be too discouraged by the 10-year thing. But that's when, at 10 years, you'll feel like I'm really a master of this subject.
Is that always the case, or are there exceptions?
Yeah, there's always an exception. Like Mozart did not take him 10 years to be a master. However, it probably took him 10 years to be at his personal master level. At 10 years into the music field, he probably felt like he was really good at what he was doing.
That's when he hit his peak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a guess because I haven't interviewed Mozart, but maybe one day. So the expert knows more and thinks more effectively than a non-expert. That's the interesting thing. So not only do you have more information, but you also think about it better than the average person does. And I think the more information you have, the better you become at thinking about something, which is why I'm all for the idea of a general, rounded education. Because although you may never use history in the future for your job, knowing historical facts may somehow feed back into what you're doing, help you think outside the box. You know, you may be, I don't know, designing a new bridge, and you think, well, I remember there was this one bridge back in 1600 that was built, and you go back and look at that design. So having that extra information I think it enhances the creativity, which I think is one of the reasons why the United States is one of the most creative countries on the planet, because America is known for thinking outside the box about things, and it's probably because we push knowing all of this general information. All right. And then expertise can compensate to some extent for age-related losses. So remember, now we're getting into the elderly. So the older you get, you're starting to lose some of your abilities, you're starting to lose some of your memory, but you're becoming so much better at certain things that it can completely compensate for the loss. We also tend to specialize more as we get older. Okay, autobiographical memory again. We sort of talked about this already, but the things that make us remember any information, whether it's autobiographical or otherwise, personal significance. Does it have something to do with you? Is it important to you? You'll remember it better. So just like if you're studying your psych text, if you can apply it to your own life, your brain will say this is important enough to remember. This is also why I tell so many stories. I try to put things into context, make it more interesting for you. The greater distinctness or uniqueness we're more likely to pay attention to. So the one time that you were jumped, or the one time you got an award, and this was out of the ordinary for you, you were really going to remember that. Emotional intensity, we talked about that. So whether it is negative or positive, you're more likely to remember it. if it has emotional intensity. Which is also why I like to show videos, because I think videos are much more emotional than me blabbing on up here. And then life phase. We remember things best from our recent past or from our teenage and early adulthood. Not sure exactly why. Maybe the brain's more efficient during that time period. It's also more of an emotional time period. There's a lot of emotional angst between 15 and 25. So perhaps our brain remembers that more. That's also the development of our identity. So it could be that our brain is saying this period is very important to who you are, and so you need to hold on to these memories. So obviously memories determine who you become. What's that?
It is who you are.
It is who you are. Your memories are who you are. You can't remember anything. Are you really yourself anymore? It's a big philosophical debate right there, right? So older adults, they generally keep their memory pretty well until their 70s, and that's when we see a decline in memory. However, they become slower at their cognitive processing. It takes them a little bit more time to think things through. If you've ever tried to teach your grandma or grandpa how to use the internet or any bit of technology, I'm sure you're familiar with that.
That commercial where the grandkids come, they go, Grandma, Grandma, and they shove the technological devices in their face before even giving them a hug. Do you remember that commercial?
Yes, exactly.
That's kind of how I am.
There is there's a great skit. Let's see, I think it's this. Yeah, here it is. Just fair warning, this is Irish, so I can't guarantee whether or not there's any bad language in it.
I'm pregnant.
Oops, that's
tonight.
not bad. Yeah, shut up.
Oh God, I've broken it. Like, Oisin, what have I done now?
Well, nothing, it's fine.
I have had it with this cursed machine. You sit down there now and show me how to use it.
Well, I have to do my homework.
It'll only take a second. What did you do there now?
I didn't do anything.
Well, you did something. There.
Well, I just moved the mouse across the screen.
There it is again now.
It's the mouse. Double click.
Double click.
You have to do it faster. No, just let me do it. It's please.
I want you to show me how to do it. I don't want you to do it for me.
You just type in your email address.
Right. Okay. A. N. We've lost it. Where is it? Oh yeah, N. Oh, look, I've got an email from a Prince Saragaba from Nigeria.
Oh, no, I don't think that's actually a prince.
Oh, you're jealous?
No, he's just trying to rob you.
He's a prince, he's stuck in an airport and he needs help. Now, where's my credit card details?
Oh, no.
It keeps offering me cookies. I got an email from the Bank of Europe asking me to reconfirm my credit card details.
No,
so I just put them in here now.
that.
I am an hour trying to get this bloody printer to work and it just refuses to do anything. Okay. Oh God, what's this now?
It's just the terms and conditions.
The application may ask for your permission to access.
You don't have to read them, it's just Gmail.
It says, please read the terms and conditions before.
Yeah, but nobody. It's 14 pages long. You don't. Nobody. Whoa!
Oh, I've clicked out of it. What's this now? History. Oh, that could be interesting. Might be something on the Renaissance.
Oh, no, you can't. Don't open that. You can't open the history folder. It could break the computer.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Soshi, what is that?
They were put on the line minute for watching pieces.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Right? I love full alarms.
Washing machines in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, welcome to Ireland. Yeah, small homes, small washing machines, small refrigerators. If it's a big refrigerator, they call it an American style refrigerator.
It was seen in my big fat big menu too, like all the siblings are pulling each other to help the dad. Right. And they're all like trying to run away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, obviously this is a joke and there's some level of stereotype to it. There's many older people who very easily use the computer. My grandma's she has her iPhone, and anytime we upgrade, she's like, what do you mean you have the iPhone X? I only have the iPhone 7. This is not acceptable. And so it's like we either have to not tell her or just be prepared to buy her a new iPhone. She's totally into her iPhone. But she can't start her computer.
How old is your daughter?
83.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a Facebook. She's totally addicted to Facebook. Although it was funny because when she first got Facebook, she'd post on our pages and it would just be like random letters. And now, now she's got it down. But, and then she's always posting stuff. You have no idea what Trump did this time or whatever. I'm like, Grandma, where did you hear that? Oh, it's on Facebook. Can't believe everything on Facebook now. Of course, now she's irritated about it. I did see this on Facebook, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Okay, Grandma. But
Keeps offering me cookies.
Keeps offering me cookies, yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's multiple factors going on. So cognitive processing does slow down, especially when you hit 70. But there's also that some tasks are so different than what you were raised to do that it becomes very difficult to do that. So technology is obviously not something that my grandma would have been raised with. So for her to conquer that task, it takes a whole nother type of cognitive skill than what she was trained on. Now, if we both go out and pick blueberries, she's going to be the queen of it because she made money as a kid picking blueberries. Yeah.
We have a lot of older teachers who are resistant to learning any of the new technology.
Yeah.
They have taken out, the old projectors that used to just put the film on and then now it's gone and now you have kind of like this thing going on. Now we have the TVs and now we've got the one notebook, OneNote and they have to learn to use it and they're just, I can't do it. Maybe I'll retire. I mean, they really don't want to learn it. And I'm kind of almost there with them on I have to go to the OneNote training and all that. I'm thinking, I don't know if I can. That's a lot.
Yeah, I finally realized I'm getting old because I have an iPhone. I'm an Apple person, so I have an iPhone, and a text message went off, and my niece went, "You never changed the text ring," and I realized I'm the person where I buy a phone and I buy all the different rings or upload all the different rings usually. And I just realized I didn't have time to learn how to do this, and I still haven't figured out, the whole stupid, you have to sync it with iTunes to upload it drives me crazy. And I'm not going to bother to learn that. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm getting older. So.
When my grandma came here to America the first time, we went to Friday's Eve. You know how they have the screen where you can pay on. We can pay for it. So she was like, "Oh, is the food for free or do we have to pay?" And I was like, "No, it's not free. We have to pay on this machine." She was like, "Oh, how come you don't use cash?" She's like, "Oh, como está pagando l'argent?" And I was like, "Well, you have to use a machine now, so that way they can serve more people and focus less on coming back and forth.
Less on customer service.
Yeah.
So they can hire more people.
So they can hire more people. There you go. Yeah.
They can make more money.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, it's just difficult because not only are you processing the information slower, but there's always new information, and it's a different learning style than what you had before. So that can really make the cognitive decline that you see in the elderly look really extreme. So remember, it may not be so much they're declining as much as things are just so new and different than when they were kids. So give them a little credit. Yeah.
And I also told her about how you can go to school online now, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
She doesn't believe in that. She's like, "How are you going to learn anything?"
Maybe it's because I'm old too, but I agree with her on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I once was required, I used to teach at a graduate school in Orange County for marital and family therapy, and they made me teach therapeutic communication online.
Yeah.
So how to communicate effectively with your client. And they taught it online. This is ridiculous. Yeah.
The marketplace of ideas here. People get to hear others, and we don't get that.
Right. And how many of you practice communicating with somebody else in an online? I'll talk on my discussion board about how I would communicate. All right. What have we talked about? So when we start to see really severe decline, this is when we're talking about the really elderly. So usually 80s, 90s, you really begin to see the decline. 70, it becomes noticeable, but it's not bad. So don't even freak out about your 70s, because it's not really until your 80s and your 90s that things start becoming worse. And it's not even necessarily terrible then either, especially if you're keeping things active. Not all people experience difficulties. It's mostly if you're sick. So keep yourself healthy now, and you don't have to worry about old age quite as much. Okay? And not all kinds of memory tasks cause difficulty either. some memory tasks are harder for the elderly than others. Yeah.
My mom, she's only like 46, and she's just like, oh, I'm ready to die, I'm ready to go. I really don't have life, I can't.
Yeah, that attitude is going to have a significant impact on you too. If you
And she's diabetic. I'm like, well, you're not eating right in the kind you eating all this bread. You know, you don't.
Yeah, and the diabetes could then feed back and cause depression too. So.
Yeah, and now that she sees me losing weight, she wants me to help her.
Oh, that's good.
Too, so I'm like, okay, I'll help you. But
That's
you have to
encouraging. Look up the
make
keto
sure-
diet. Get her on that. 'cause
I'll
That's what you
talk
need to do.
about
Low
that.
carb, yeah, especially for diabetes. Yeah.
The rest of this is on the PowerPoint. I have to leave her.
Yes. It is on the PowerPoint. Okay, Cindy, you brought this up last time, that time tested does have an effect. So when their time is being tested, it increases anxiety and it makes their memory worse. Okay, same thing happens with you guys though too, so don't think it's just the elderly. When you know you're taking an exam, that anxiety level spikes, cortisol blocks the recall of memory, and now you can't access it anymore. So if you relax during your exam, like I'm lucky because my mom's philosophy was, you do the best you can. If you do bad, whatever, you need to take class over again. It's no big deal. You just do it over again. And so I was never stressed out. I've never felt stressed out at an exam. So I have never had test-taking anxiety, never blanked out like I hear so many people do because of me.
Just go take it over.
Yeah, I'll just take it over again. What does it matter? Here,
It's not all
maybe
teachers give
$200
you that option, you know?
to retake. Yeah, they are making it more difficult. Like if you get a C or better, then you have to wait 3 terms to take it over. So that's a little bit more difficult than when I was in college. But I mean, I didn't pass a class once in my doctorate. I got a B-, and that's not passing. So I had to pay to take it over again. That was $1,500. So that was painful. I was very motivated to pass it the second time. But yeah, I mean, even that, it's just like, oh, that sucks that I lose that money, but it wasn't a stressful thing for me. It was just, I was kind of mad at the teacher.
All that just for some knowledge. That's crazy.
Right? Yeah. All right. So time, when there is a limited amount of time, it stresses you out more. You don't perform as well. And then this is what I was saying before. If the information is unfamiliar or can't be linked to existing knowledge, that's when you really see it being difficult. And we see this more extreme with the older adults than with younger adults and children. For especially children, their brain is designed to take in new information and to learn things that aren't linked to to previous material. That's what their brain does. Adults' brains are designed to say, I have this foundation of information and I build on top of it. So now when you have to learn something without a foundation, like new technology, your brain just goes, what is this? What am I linking this to? I don't get what's going on. And it becomes much more difficult to learn those new things. And then I talked about this in the cognition chapter, that in natural setting, older adults perform better than laboratory or academic settings. So if it is, a test on cooking skills, older adults will perform better than children. If it's an academic test, older adults will perform worse than children. So it's just because that's what your life experience has been. So again, that artificially makes it look like older adults are performing poorly when it's just a difference in expertise. So what they do tend to suffer on is tasks requiring recall rather than recognition. So like, for instance, multiple choice tests are recognition tests. So you have to recognize the right answer versus fill in the blank is recall. You have to bring the entire answer out of your mind. So older adults do worse with retrieval of a memory. They tend to retrieve slower. It's a little less efficient to pull something completely out of long-term memory, which some of you probably experience on tests too. They also tend to have more trouble with explicit memory tasks rather than implicit memory tasks. So implicit memory is like automatic processes, like driving a car is an implicit memory task. So if I give you a test and I say, do this thing that you've done a million times and you're good at, then they get it without a problem. If I tell you to think through this problem-solving issue, that's an explicit memory task, and that tends to be much more difficult. So even if it's like cook a new recipe, which obviously is going to require some thinking and planning, even though it's new, they're much more efficient. Older people are much more efficient at that than younger people would be. Does that make sense? Okay. And then I talked about this earlier in the lecture, that They keep semantic memory really good, but they start to decline in episodic memory. So the data, the facts, the information stays. The stories slowly start to decline, which may be one reason why older people like to repeat stories of their past, because that helps to keep those memories intact. What was that? Your grandma? Yeah. My grandma too, but I like it. I love when she tells stories about herself.
Everybody's grandma.
Everybody's
Yes.
grandma, yeah. Yeah, it's an older person
All of
thing.
us when we get to that ripe age.
Yeah. I think it's great though. I actually record it. I videotape her. I record the audio of it.
Oh, I wish I'd have done that. That's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's living history.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
my father-in-law was in World War II as a medic,
Mm-hmm.
and he never liked to talk about it. He got a Purple Heart. Something happened to him. But when he did talk about it, I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And if I had it on recording,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people are gone. They're
Yeah.
dying out.
And you can't tell your kids the story as well. As
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could, yeah.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Why didn't I meet you sooner?
Aw.
That's great.
Okay. So another point to remember is that when older adults have memory problems, they're not caused by deficiency in the knowledge. It's not that they don't know things. It's just that they may not be able to retrieve the memory as well. Okay. Older adults also have more negative beliefs about their memory, and that is highly influential in how poorly they perform. So your attitude towards your memory is very strongly correlated with how good your memory is. So if you believe that you will lose your memory, if you believe that elderly years are just like you're doomed to a horrible life, then that's probably what you're going to get. If you have a positive attitude towards it, then you tend to stay more active and you do things with your life, like self-fulfilling prophecy. You do things that keep your cognitive skills more intact. And then culture, of course, has a huge view on it too. Some cultures are very negative towards the elderly. Some cultures are very positive. So whichever culture you're part of, you're more likely to live up or down to the expectations. Let's see. So when we come to the strategies we use, older adults, it's funny because they've learned the memory strategies, but they often don't use them anymore. And I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe it's because they're out of the academic world for so long and maybe they've forgotten some of them, or maybe their brain isn't automatically going to those strategies that they learned in the past. But that may be one reason why their memory suffers, is because they're not using the memory chapters, the memory strategies that we all use in our academic years. But the biggest problem, like I said before, is the retrieval. Their brain is not efficient at retrieving the information. One reason may be that the neuronal connections have weakened. They've lost some of them. It's been many years since they used the academic type of information. And so it may be harder to access the information that is stored. It's still in the brain, but it's not efficiently stored, and you can't get to it as fast. So it takes longer to get the information out and to be able to use it. But it's not the storage, it's not the encoding that's an issue. The information's there. You're just not pulling it out quite as well. Like the tip of the tongue phenomenon, we've all done that. You know what you're thinking of, but you can't freaking get the word out.
Yeah,
right?
and you think of it at 2 in the morning.
Yes.
And that's what it is.
Yes. And something triggers, you finally make a connection to grab that word, or maybe you access it a different way. Because what do people do? Like if you're trying to think of something and you can't remember, they say describe it. Then what are you doing? You're trying to access it through a different neuronal pathway.
It's like when my professor found a website where they had old TV shows.
Old what shows?
Theme songs.
Oh, theme songs.
Yeah. And she played it for us, and we always tried to find it, but all of us would do that sometimes we couldn't remember, so she played
They're like, oh, I almost have it. Yeah. Yeah. Because you didn't have that theme song title, the show title, sufficiently connected to the theme song. Yeah. Yeah. Our processing capacity also changes. We don't process as well, we don't process efficiently, and how much information we can process at one time decreases. So remember, moving from young childhood up into the teen years, our short-term memory gets better. We can process more information at one time. That begins to decline again in the elderly years, 70, 80, 90. And so that's one reason why it feels like older people don't get things as fast, because they're not holding as much information all at one time. They're not able to make the connections as fast. And just like younger kids, if they're not making all those connections, they're not storing their memories as efficiently, and so they don't remember things. Sort of like infantile amnesia, again, happening on the elderly side. Not as severe, but it's still happening. And then they also have trouble ignoring irrelevant tasks, just like in the younger years. So if information is coming in that doesn't make sense, or if it isn't important to the task, if that is taking room in your short-term memory, now you have basically just giving yourself a smaller short-term memory, and you can't think quite as well, quite as clearly, quite as efficiently. I think I'll talk most about this. Oh, here's another reason why there could be a decline, is that sensory memory also decreases. You don't smell things as well, you don't see things as well, you don't hear things as well. And so your brain says it's not that important. It doesn't pay quite as much attention. And if you're not paying quite as much attention, you're not remembering it as well. Because then your brain goes, well, that wasn't important because we didn't pay attention to it. Well, that's because I didn't smell it as well as I should have smelled. So now I'm not going to store the scent memory.
Well, why do older folks like such bland food? I remember my in-laws just didn't like
they
a
don't
lot of spice.
taste as well. So you think they'd want spicier food. Maybe it upsets their stomach. I know that happens to a lot of
they
people.
just, you go to any buffet where the older folks love to go, and the food is bland. You think this isn't
I think
important.
I have a theory is that a lot of people, older people, worry about like their salt intake or their sugar intake because they have diabetes or high blood pressure.
I know I don't eat no sugar.
So then they go to all-you-can-eat buffet and eat a bunch of macaroons and cheese
Yeah,
with
but they justify it.
Yeah.
They justify it.
Yeah.
But they go, this is delicious, and it's like, no, it's not. It has no spice and no salt.
I don't understand because you begin to lose your sense of taste.
Yeah.
So you think you would want, like for
More
instance, my dad didn't have, he couldn't smell anything because he worked in the aerospace industry with chemicals, so he lost his sense of smell. And if you can't smell things, you can't taste well either. So he always wanted like the spicier, like if he wasn't sweating and like nose running and all of that crying, then it wasn't spicy enough. And it's because he couldn't taste the food. So I mean, spice isn't actually hotness is not a taste. It's actually activating your pain receptors. That's what we sense as spiciness. So he could still sense spiciness, but yeah, I don't know. So you think older people would want more spice?
My grandparents are completely different.
Yeah.
So, like my grandpa would always say he loved himself because he lived until he was 96. And salt on everything. Even if you taste
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how many carbs did he eat? Like wheat products, sugar, things like that. Not a lot. Yeah, it's a myth. It's sort of a myth that we shouldn't be eating enough salt. The problem is we eat so many carbohydrates, sugars, that sugar holds onto water in your system. So that salt that's in your body's water gets held onto, and then salt can cause high blood pressure. If you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, sugar isn't holding onto water, and it's more diuretic. You pee more, and so you're flushing out a lot of sodium. So you actually need to increase your sodium intake tremendously if you're eating low carbohydrates. But it's just because we eat so much crap in our modern diet that we have to lower our salt intake. So like I eat a ketogenic diet, which is basically no carbs or very low carbs. And so I actually take salt pills because I sprinkle salt on everything and I still get low sodium. Because you're flushing it all out through your kidneys. Doesn't hold on to salt.
When you're on the keto diet, can you eat collard greens or turkey meat?
Yeah, any protein, any vegetables. Even though vegetables are carbs, they're balanced with fiber, and so it's really like a net no carb effect. But yes, turkey and veggies, totally fine. All right.
I told you to replace red meat with turkey.
Oh, red meat's great for you. It's such a lie that red meat's bad.
Yeah?
Farm-raised, commercial, factory-raised meat is bad for you, whether it is turkey, white meat, or beef, or bread. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have a steak tonight.
Go for
Really?
it. Have a grass-fed
I
steak.
always
It's
thought
very
red
healthy
meat was
for you.
bad for you too.
No, it's just because of the way the animals are raised. Yeah.
With butter and salt, yes.
Because the animals are raised on very inflammatory diets. For instance,
Well, I'm glad I
feeding dead chickens and chicken litter, like the straw and poop and everything, they mix that all up and turn it into pellets to feed the cows. You think that's healthy?
No.
No, cows are supposed to eat grass, not dead chickens. You know. M&Ms, that's a popular one to feed cows.
M&M chocolate?
There's some farms, dairy, especially dairy farms around the M&M facility in Pennsylvania, and they ship out all of their bad M&Ms to the farms and they feed them to the cows.
Yeah, you have
Carbohydrates
to tell me
fattens
where
them
to
up.
get good meat. You have to tell me where to get good meat.
Yeah.
And that's how we get chocolate milk?
Yeah, sorry. You know what, next week, how about we'll talk a little bit more about nutrition and stuff, and then we can talk about where you can get good food. 'Cause nutrition is so important for a healthy psychology. Yeah. All right, where are we at here? So your memory, your cognitive performance, and everything is a combination of your education, your IQ, your health, your lifestyle. So it is not simply your age determines how your mind is going to work. It's your age, but it's also how you lived your entire life. So if you're a well-educated person, you keep your mind active, you're going to see hardly any decline. My sister played the saxophone too, and she had a teacher, when she started with him, he was 94. And yeah, he was spry and active, and he used his age to get kisses from girls all the time. All the
Smart
time.
too.
Yeah. He's like, I haven't gotten a kiss from you today. I could die tonight. You know, I'm so old.
I could die tonight.
Yeah.
So like that was a musician when I was
So
like,
cute.
and
I wonder if he kept his mind.
yeah, but he was up until he was 95. He was always teaching all the grandkids, and his family would have like 80.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, but he plays drums, guitar, piano, saxophone, trumpet, and everything.
So he kept himself very active.
Yeah, he would always give lessons to them. And
So he ate healthy, he kept his mind active. Sounded like he had a positive attitude too.
No.
And he ate lots of salt, so he kept his neurological system functioning well.
Laughing also keeps you alive.
Oh yes, laughing is very good for you.
My grandma's so goofy. I'm like, dang, no wonder you're so.
Yeah. Yep, that's probably why my grandma's still alive too.
Well, my mom, she's also so serious.
Yeah. I think we've talked about all of this. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so this is an interesting theory. It's called the selection optimization compensation framework. So what this theory says is that a lot of older people, even though they're having declines, they don't have noticeable decline because of this sort of mental framework that they have. So the theory goes that they look, consciously or not, they look at the skills that they're really good at. And they select these skills to specialize in. And we focus more and more on the things that we're really good at. We optimize those skills, we strengthen them, make them more useful. And then we use those to compensate for wherever we have deficits. So, for instance, I may start suffering in my technological skill area. I may begin to have cognitive deficits there. But my social skills are so good, and I have optimized them so well, that I can happily get my grandkids to come and teach me how to use it. And so it doesn't really seem like I have any deficits, because I'm compensating so well. Okay? So, again, we have such a negative outlook in our society today towards the elderly, but besides people who are sick, we don't really see a lot of suffering. Right? And one of the other things that we sometimes see as decline is when people lose their hearing. And so they're not hearing what you're saying, they may not be catching all the words, and so they're comprehending slower. And when people can't hear well, we often think they're dumb. And so that's one of the other reasons why older people have such negative stereotypes. It's not that they aren't thinking well, but they didn't hear everything you said. What was that?
I said, oh, no, they're not.
No, they're not. Also, older people tend to care less about your opinion of them, and so sometimes that can also come across as having deficits in certain areas.
No wonder some of them be dressing like they're young again, but they don't care.
Oh my gosh, I saw this woman, she must have been 75, and she had the skinniest jeans on I'd ever seen. And from the back, she actually had a nice body, and I thought she was a younger person.
Oh, wow.
and then I saw that she's like somebody's great grandma. It's like, it's uncomfortable. I don't know. It's just not okay. But I don't know. Good for her. She's got a better body than me, so whatever. Yeah. So I don't know. Being old isn't the end of the world. It is the end of the PowerPoint, though. So awesome. You finished that one early. Does anybody have questions? No? Yes. The exam will be put up today, and then you'll have until Sunday at midnight to do it. So that's going to be chapter 3, the genetics. The intelligence chapter. Wait a minute. What chapters are we?
3, 7, and 8, right?
3, 7, and 8. That sounds right. Yeah. Yeah. Memory and cognition. Yes? Yeah, there will be a quiz. There is a quiz up already for.
Due today?
I think I put it due Friday, if I remember right. Oops.
Did you say last class we were going to talk about the essay?
Yeah, we'll talk about the essay too. Quiz is due tomorrow?
I saw something.
Oh yeah, tomorrow's Friday, yeah. What?
I thought I saw something that was due yesterday.
Yes. The last exam.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. She said you're able to do today until
Yeah, so intelligence, cognition. Oh, no, intelligence was on the last one. So genetics, cognition, memory. And then we're back on the right schedule. So, okay? And that'll be Sunday at midnight. Okay, so the term paper. Let's talk a little bit about the term paper. So how many people have bought the Danish Way of Parenting book? Yeah? Okay, good. Reading it? Yeah? Good. So in the Danish Way of Parenting, it's obviously about how the Danes parent. So they have just a different philosophy that's very American. It's not current American, but it is how we have generally parented in the past, where we sort of had this laissez-faire attitude that kids just do what they do, and it's very hands-off. Like, you let children live their own life. And we have changed dramatically in the past, I don't know, 2-3 decades. 2 decades, really, I'd say. It's amazing. Just like 20 years has changed, complete 180 in how we're parenting kids. So we've talked a lot about this, so I won't go into it too much detail. But, you know, you've got the modern helicopter parenting, or also tiger moms, tiger parenting. You might have heard that as well. The like ferocious, overprotective parent that is attacking all the teachers for giving the students bad grades. I've dealt with some, even at college level. I give an assignment in my Psych 101 class where you're required to have an argument with somebody, and we talk about communication skills. There was one mother who had a very big problem with that, and I don't care, I'm a college professor. Yeah.
It's funny because in my Psych 101, I had Bruce.
Who?
Mr. Bruce.
Bruce, oh, okay, yeah, Malcolm, yeah.
And the assignment he gave us was to actually work out, you know, a situation with someone that you had a breaking off with, but not expect anything in return.
Oh, that's a great project. Yeah, this mom would probably have an issue with that too. The only issue I've ever had with a project in this department, or actually I think it was anthropology, is they required students to go out and beg, to pretend to be homeless and actually beg, which is illegal. So I was like, best
That'd be hard to do too.
asking somebody to break the law.
Speech class for like 4 hours.
Did you? But did the teacher require you to do it?
Well, no.
No. Okay.
There
So
was a whole bunch
if
of
you
different
voluntarily
categories.
break the law, that's one thing. But I don't think as teachers, we're probably not putting ourselves in a good position to require our students to break the law. But so what you're going to be doing in this book, with this term paper, is you're going to be exploring the concept of how did the Danes parent, what are the major ideas in it, how does it compare to sort of modern American parenting, particularly the helicopter tiger parenting. So you can do some research about, you know, what are the effects of this. There are papers that are published. You can search on PubMed or any of the journal article papers and find some interesting information about the detriments of helicopter parenting and what it does to children. increasing depression, suicide, making their academic performance worse, and so on. So you're going to just sort of explore those concepts. And there's some questions I put down here. You don't exactly have to go through that, but I think it's just sort of a good outline of things you should be considering. So the second part is
You have this up on the, in the.
This is the syllabus. Yeah, this is the syllabus. So the second part of it is that you are going to find a kid, if yours, somebody else's, doesn't matter. And it could be anywhere from baby up to teen years, doesn't matter the age, just some child that you have relative control over. And you're going to be implementing one of the Danish way of parenting techniques. So if you go through the book, some of the ideas, they have the parent acronym. I can never remember exactly which ones they are. P is play, right? Yeah. So P is for play. So the Danes are very much how we used to be in this country, where play was very important. I mean, we've got schools that have eliminated recess even for kindergartners, which is insane, because they need to be focusing on their academics. So you may pick some kids and look at how do they play. Do they get free play? Do they get to play outside in nature? And you are going to do an experiment. Maybe you will, like last semester I had a girl who, she didn't have children, but her little sister, when she babysat, she allowed the little sister to go into the backyard, and she didn't watch her. And it was a nerve-wracking experience. She felt like she was sure that the kid was going to be kidnapped, that she was going to be blamed for it, the kid's going to be murdered. I mean, just like this huge anxiety panic attack. And she finally ended up having to watch the kid from the kitchen window to make sure the child was okay. But at least she didn't tell the kid that she was watching. But the really interesting thing is the child also had huge anxiety. The kid kept coming in and asking her sister, "Are you watching me? Is this okay? Am I going to get in trouble? Is somebody going to kidnap me?" And had no idea what to do with her time either. So after 2 minutes, she's like, "I'm bored. I want to come inside and watch TV." And so then the sister had to keep telling her, "No, you have to go outside and play." So it was this really interesting experiment. And at the end of it, her sister now loves playing outside. So she did it. She decided to do it every single Saturday. She babysat every single Saturday. So every single Saturday when she babysat over the entire semester, she made her sister go and play outside unsupervised. And finally, by the end of the semester, she wasn't watching her sister anymore. Nothing had gone wrong. The sister was enjoying it, and she was even letting her play outside in the front yard now, which caused another anxiety attack. It was really interesting. And there was actually, I'm on the Danish Way of Parenting Facebook page, and I was talking about the experience on the page, and there was a Danish journalist, and now this was written up in a Danish newspaper. So that student got to be famous in Denmark, to say how crazy Americans are. All right, so you could pick play. You could pick one of the other ones. So what is A? Authenticity, I think. Yeah, authenticity. So being authentic with your child. We really sugarcoat things in modern life. So if you, like Little Mermaid. Does anybody remember the Little Mermaid that came out in the 80s? Actually, I think it was like 79 or something. It was the real Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. If you know the actual fairy tale, Ariel dies in it. She does not get the love of her life. Ursula gets the love of her life. And the only way she can get her voice back and avoid dying is she has to stab the prince and take the voice power back or something like that. I can't remember what it says. But she loves him so much that she decides instead she's going to die, and she turns into sea foam. That's the real story. Which, by the way, Hans Christian Andersen, Danish. Okay?
I went to his home.
Did you really? Copenhagen? Was it Copenhagen?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a Little Mermaid statue in Copenhagen. So they believe in being honest with their children. They believe in butchering a giraffe in front of them and letting them see what it's like. Right, but you're like, no, how could you do that? So if you watch Danish shows, there's a really popular one called what's it called? Oh gosh, it's like this murder mystery one. But it's like it always turns out bad. And many of their stories have bad endings because they believe that children should understand that sometimes things turn out good, sometimes things turn out bad, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're sad, that's okay. They don't have like Disney stuff in Denmark. They have things that sometimes the stories are really crappy, and everybody's sad, and they're okay with it.
Growing up, I didn't believe in some of those. I didn't know.
Yeah. Now, I do believe lying to your kids about fairy tales, but because I think that's age appropriate for like the imagination part. But I don't believe in lying to your kids that everything's going to be perfect and turn out great, and you should never stress or have anxiety or whatever. That I think it's good to be honest, age appropriately honest to your children, especially about their emotions. I had a friend who her mom died when she was 6, and nobody ever told her.
What?
Nobody ever told her. Mom just suddenly wasn't home, and when she asked, she was shut down. Nobody would answer her, and I think she was finally 8 when one of her cousins told her, your mom died in a car accident. Nobody in the family would say anything. Just all of a sudden one day mom's gone, and everybody seems sad. All the adults are sad. They even had a funeral, and not a single person said anything. Well, she didn't go to the funeral, but they had like the wake back at the house. So all these family members come in sad, dressed in black. Nobody would say a word to her about why it's going on. Yeah, it's totally outrageous. So I mean, that is the exact opposite of authenticity. There is an age-appropriate way to help your children deal with their emotions honestly. So authenticity is important. If you're sad, there's nothing wrong with letting your children know you're sad. You don't have to pretend to be happy. There's some movie with Amy Schumer and her son, if you've seen it, her son comes up to her and asks, what was it like when I was born? And they're all like, oh, it was the best.
Like a Mother's Day commercial.
Oh, was that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the best day of our lives, and they're saying all these wonderful things, and then it cuts back to the actual, and she's like screaming, you know. And then it goes back to telling how beautiful it was, and then she's like punching her husband or whatever, you know. And that the Danes would not do that. The Danes would say honestly, like, it was so hard giving birth to you. Like that was it hurt, and there's all this stuff, and and it was tough. But I'm still so happy to have you here, which I think says a lot more to the child about their value than lying and saying everything is butterflies and unicorns and and glitter and everything's wonderful. So, and it doesn't teach the children that life is difficult. They also don't overpraise. That's one thing about authenticity. We have been taught in our culture, and I do this too, and I try to break myself of it. Good job with everything. Like, put my pencil away in the right place. Good job. And they're like 11. Research shows that praise can actually be demotivating, especially if it's inappropriate praise. Giving your children toys for doing something right, demotivating. For instance, my niece asked me to teach her how to play the flute, so I've been giving her lessons. And she said, you know what would be a good idea? If every time I do so many lessons, or so many practices, that you buy me a toy. I said, no way. I'm not buying you crap for playing the flute. You play the flute because you want to play the flute. If you have to do this because of a toy, then I'm not wasting my time giving you flute lessons. So you tell me, do you want to keep playing it or not? Oh, I want to keep playing it. Great. Then we're playing it because we love it. Right? So that is authentic. I'm not going to bribe you into it, and I'm not going to lie to you. Like she keeps asking me, am I good at playing the flute? And I said, you are very good for a beginner flute player. You should be proud of where you're at. She's had 3 lessons. She said, you're 3 lessons in, and you already know how to play 5 notes. That's awesome. And it's true. She's doing very good for 3 lessons in. But I also told her, you're not the world's best flute player yet, but you shouldn't be. There's no way you could be at this age. So you're doing very good for where you're at, and you should be proud of that. That is an authentic reaction. Whereas other people are like, oh, you're so good. You're going to grow up, and you're going to win America's, whatever, Got Talent thing. Which is why the first tryouts for America's Got Talent is so entertaining, because so many terribly talented people's parents told them they were great at it. R is for reframing. So the Danes are very good at authentically dealing with the negative and then reframing it into something that's positive. Yes, this is hard. Like, for instance, giving flute lessons to my niece. When you first learn to play the flute, you get very dizzy because you're blowing so much air to try to make even a single sound. I'm sure saxophone was the same way. So she gets dizzy, and she goes, oh, that means I'm bad. I said, no, it doesn't. That means that you're building up your lungs. Your lungs are going to become very strong. So I'm not lying to her. She is bad, but she's, you should be. She's supposed to be bad at this point. But I can without lying to her, I can show her what the positive side of this is. Yes, obviously, if you've been playing for 20 years, you're not going to get dizzy like this. When you get good, you won't get dizzy anymore. But this means that you're learning how to play it, and you're getting better at it, and you're less dizzy today than you were last week, so that means you've improved. So you can reframe things so that it's realistically optimist. That's realistic optimism is a Danish term. Realistic optimism. We look at the positive, but we look at it realistically. We don't lie to our children about, what's going on. E is for empathy. They're very empathetic with their children. One technique that you can do is when your children come up to you, they're arguing about something or pissed off at each other, is you just say, it looks to me like you're very angry at your sister. And you let them know, I understand how you're feeling. You'd be amazed at how well that works. I tried it. The first time I tried it with my sister's kid when he was younger, and he was throwing this huge temper tantrum. He'd thrown himself on his bed, locked himself in his room, and was just pouting, face down in the pillow, so he was mad at his sister. And I walked in, I'm like, okay, I just read about this technique, and there you go. Wow, you're in here with your face in your pillow, and you look like you are really angry and upset. And then I didn't say anything. And all of a sudden, he flips over and he goes, yes, because she did blah, 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 and I'm so upset, and it wasn't right. It was amazing how easily he spoke once he knew that I understand how he was feeling. Because I could have gone in there and I'm like, what are you doing? You need to learn how to share with your sister and stop being such a baby. Which you do hear parents say stuff like that all the time. And all it teaches them is, I don't care how you feel. So the Danish are they'll discipline their kids, don't get me wrong, but they will let them know, I understand how you feel. Now, I may or may not be right, but I get why you're feeling this way. But we need to deal with it in a better way. Okay? So empathy is important. And then N is for no ultimatums, which is one I struggle with. Us Americans are always saying, don't do that again, or I'm going to spank your butt, or you're going to be in timeout, or whatever. And the Danes aren't big into ultimatums. They trust children. They believe if you explain things to them, that they are self-responsible. They will be responsible for themselves enough to know what the best behavior is. And then after that, they might give them consequences if they still don't follow it, but they will not tell them or else sort of things. They'll sit down with them and they'll say, when you do this to your sister, this is what it's going to result in. And is this how you want your sister to feel? Is this how you want your relationship to be? And they'll go through what the consequences are, and then they'll leave it at that and see what the kids do. Now, at some point, there may be a punishment for that if they continue the bad behavior, but their first response will not be to threaten their children. It will be to sit down and explain to them what this situation is doing. So it's a much more sort of intelligent-oriented sort of think through the situation. They're trying to teach them to think through it rather than just forcing them to behave appropriately. And then T is what I like the most, is togetherness. The Danish have a word, hygge. You just learned a word in Danish. Okay. Hygge means togetherness, coziness, the feeling of warmth and connectedness that if it was a cold, rainy, stormy night and you're with all of your best friends in a cabin up in Big Bear with a crackling fire, drinking hot chocolate together and laughing. That's what hygge means. Doesn't translate well. So the Danes go through more candles per year, more pounds of candles than anybody else in the entire world. Even if you go to work, like a college classroom, there will probably be candles burning. I should start doing that, huh? And they actively do things to try to create this feeling of hygge. And they have the word hyggelig, which is hyggelig. How hygge is this? What is the measurement of hygge involved in this activity? Is it very hyggelig? Is it only sort of hyggelig? The more hyggelig it is, the more worth doing it is. So like freedom is an American value, hygge is a Danish value. It is one of the things that they aspire to in their life. So let me actually, here's a great video about hygge. Let's see, we'll just do the short one.
Look up Hugo on Instagram and you'll find 1.7 million posts on woolly socks and hot chocolate. Pinterest experienced a 285% spike on Hugo pins, and last year it was shortlisted as the Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. What was once a Danish custom is now big in the US. Mike Viking is the founder of the Happiness Research Institute and the author of The Little Book of Hugo, a bestseller that was reprinted 3 times before its release and is published in 26 countries.
All right, Mike, tell me, what is Hygge?
Hygge is being consciously cozy, but it has also been described as the art of creating a nice atmosphere. It's been called the pursuit of everyday happiness. It's also been called socializing for introverts.
Okay.
But it's about being together with the people you love. It's about relaxation. It's about indulgence. It's about good food. It's about gratitude. It's about equality. All those things mixed together is Hygge.
Would you characterize Hygge as a lifestyle trend or a self-help?
Actually, neither. I mean, to us Danes, Hygge is part of our culture. It's part of our national DNA. Perhaps the same way that Americans see freedom as inherently American.
If you think Hygge just sounds like a trendy Scandinavian catch-all for all the things humans like in the dead of winter, comfort foods and ambiance, you're not wrong. But the Danes' conviction is singular. They burn more candles than anyone in Europe, and they eat a lot of candy per capita, all in pursuit of Hygge.
I think there is, savoring pleasures, indulgence is, I think, key in terms of Hygge, and perhaps also something simple. I think also Hygge is taking a break from demands of healthy eating. So it is about cake, it is about candy, it is about hot chocolate, it is about alcohol. Some even might say it's about sinful pleasures.
Hygge is horrible for your health, conceivably.
You could say that. I mean, compared to the Swedes and the Norwegians, we have a shorter life expectancy. We do eat more unhealthy.
But type 2 diabetes and fire hazards aren't what Danes are known for. They're known for happiness. Denmark consistently places first in the UN's World Happiness Report, an international poll where citizens are asked to self-evaluate on their well-being. The US, for all our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, has never cracked the top 10.
So what does America have to learn from Denmark in terms of happiness and Hygge?
I think, in many ways, Denmark is what the US would look like if Bernie Sanders was president. I think the most defining feature of Danish
I don't
culture and
necessarily
life
endorse
policies
that idea.
are the democratic socialism, universal health care, equal opportunities for men and women, free university education, social security. At a certain point, additional income that does not lead to improved quality of life.
Hygge's been huge all over Europe for a while, but it's zeitgeisting nicely stateside. With the help of Danish transplants like Klaus Meyer, a chef and restaurateur, Hygge is finding its place in America. Meyer has been living in the US for a year and a half and has Hygge over dinner every night with his wife Christina, an interior designer, and their daughters.
So what about this is Hygge versus just like any other family just eating a meal?
We actually have made an active decision not to build a phone, but we are together. And then everybody is included in the conversation.
And I've been to other families where they just don't even eat together, but maybe the parents are doing something else, whether like on their phones or computers, and they don't really talk to each other. And I didn't really feel the difference in the atmosphere.
While Meyer does impart some Danish culture to his staff, offering paid maternity and paternity leave, he doesn't think Denmark runs a monopoly on Hygge. It's that naming it and recognizing it gives it power.
Do you fear that, doing Hygge will fade the more time you spend here?
It could probably in many, many years, but it's one element of life. And I truly believe that many people find that moment, just they call it something else. It's a moment of groundedness and where you're close to other people and listening with your heart and see people with your heart. And even though you're more conscious about it, I can imagine that it doesn't exist somewhere else.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of Hygge. So obviously we're all, like you said, we're all experiencing that feeling of coziness and connectedness, but they try to make it they put out a daily effort to try to have Hugo. So this is every single day and everything they do, they try to create a sense of coziness and connectedness and everything, which I think is probably the biggest reason why they're generally number one, or at least in the top 3 of the happiness index. And they've been in the top 3 since the 1970s. So they're probably pretty good at that.
Chasing money.
No, and and their society helps. I mean, it's a country of only 5 million people. It's a wealthy country, so that of course helps with happiness. But at the same time, even though it's wealthy, they pay 50% of their money to taxes. And so there's sort of like, why bother working harder? Let's just enjoy life. And so, unlike America, you can get ahead in America. If you just work yourself into the grave, you'll get ahead. And so then we tend to put friends, family, everything on the back burner in order to get ahead. And there, they've been limited. They can't get ahead. So they just learn to enjoy life anyway, which I think is what we need to learn from them. And even if we're trying to get ahead, we still have to have a balance between family life and work life. And like, if you were working overtime in Denmark, you could risk getting fired. You certainly aren't going to get promoted because your boss believes, the Danish way, that you can't be an effective, efficient worker if you're working too much. You need to go home and spend some time with your spouse and with your children. Recharge, and then when you come back into work tomorrow, you'll be a better worker.
And likewise, your health needs to be intact.
Yeah, you get sick, what kind of a worker are you going to be? Yeah, exactly.
That's a big relief to have health care. When people don't have health care, that's a big worry, and they work harder so they can maintain benefits or maintain.
Yeah, and there are some negatives to it. I mean, I have a lot of friends from Denmark, and their biggest issue is there are a lot of lazy people who take advantage of the system. So, I mean, that happens anywhere. If people give you stuff, then there's going to be lazy people. But, I mean, overall, I think it's working for them. And I'm talking about Bernie Sanders. I don't think their system would translate exactly perfectly over to America. I think our culture is too different. But I do think we can adjust how we live our life and how our culture is to take advantage of some of their better ways of doing things. So we could, I don't think we could do Denmark in America, but I think we could do America in a way that had more emphasis on family and friends and free time and all that stuff. But this is an argument I've had many times with Danish friends. Yeah. Mostly about this. Yeah, stress from work is great for healing, right? I mean, maybe his home life is horrible, and he might be right, but in general, a nice, comfortable, happy, stress-free life is the best thing that's going on. Or not stress-free, but not a lot of distress, happy, good stress. So anyhow, you can do this with your kids, or with whatever kid you choose to do it. I had a student last semester who think the husband had died, maybe he left her, but I think he died. And they're just dealing with all this crap. And she decided to do the Hugo one because she didn't want to cause anxiety or anything else. So she's going to work on Hugo. And they took all of the couches and everything out of the living room. They put a bunch of floor pillows and like body pillows. And they put a really small, the kids made it themselves, a small little coffee table where you could sit at. And so they sat around on pillows doing their homework. They had board games out there. And it was just sort of like a spot to be cozy with each other and to be informal and to relax. And they took the TV out so that it was just about interacting with each other. And she got candles and all that. And she said it just did amazing things for all the sadness and grief that was in the family. It brought them so much closer together. So
that takes a load off because I was thinking like kids are a bit too old for the play and authenticity. I suppose I'm already authentic with them.
Yeah, so what you
their
choose,
age, they're 15.
Yeah, what you choose is going to depend on the kids, and it will also depend on who you are, because you may already be doing some of these things. But yeah, I mean, we could always increase the Hugo in our life.
Yes,
right,
yeah.
together. The age range, I would say probably toddler up through teenager. I mean, a newborn might be
pushing it now.
Might be pushing it.
With the mobile on his foot.
Right. Yeah. I don't think you'd get a lot out of it if it was below like 3, 2, 3. Child should at least be able to verbally interact with them. They should be able to walk. I mean, I think you could do all of these with even an infant. Like, for instance, if you have a newborn, you could do a Danish thing. Go put your kid outside in the backyard. In the cold, yeah. It's not cold right now, but go put him out in the sunshine, or maybe shaded area because it's the desert, it's not that good. And let your kid just sort of hang out outside without you watching. Go back and check as often as you need to, but let your kid get some sunshine and nature and fresh air, and then see what that does for your kid and what that does to you. Yeah. So even in
never think of.
right?
That's when my parents like this, they would put a playpen outside like a relationship.
Right.
And then like, you know.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But then they would watch the kids. To walk away from the kid is a whole
Well,
different.
Yes.
they were a playpen.
Yeah, I know. But did they walk away?
Yeah.
Oh, they did. Is there a playpen for 2 15-year-olds?
Yeah, it's helper. We're not hearing you off. Yeah. What did they do? Like jump off the roof or something?
No, she just wants to know what she did.
Where, like?
How close she was to the house.
Well, I mean, I guess if I was a Danish person, I would handle that with some authenticity and try to explain to them how dangerous it is, and then let them go off on their own again without babysitting. And then when somebody breaks a leg, you say, "See, told you so." That's how the Danish would do. The Danes probably have a lot more broken bones than us Americans nowadays.
Can I just clarify
Yes.
what we're supposed to be doing? So we are going to answer the questions that you had in your syllabus.
Yeah, so you're going to explore the ideas of Danish parenting, American parenting, the effects.
So is this kind of a summary of what we saw in the book?
A
as compared
summary,
to
and then
our thoughts
also
on-
you can do a bit of your own research, like what things you found about the effects of it and so on.
And
Anything.
then we talk about, then we go into
And then you do
our
your own
own
experiment.
Experiment, okay. And how that turns out.
Exactly.
And how long we get there.
Yes.
When is this due?
This is going to be due the last Friday of summertime, and I have no idea what day that is. You'll have to look.
And is this uploaded to them to your?
Yeah, there will be like a submission space on Blackboard. You submit it right to Blackboard, and you're good to go. Yep. You know, it just depends on what you think. If you can write efficiently, great. Most people, I'd say 5 pages, give or take, is what it'll end up being. If you can do less, awesome. I don't have to read as much, but it needs to be good. And PowerPoint. Oh yeah, and then you're going to do a PowerPoint on one of the chapters. But you're not presenting on it. You just do PowerPoint in general. Practice your PowerPoint skills.
Oh my God.
You gotta remember this summer.
And I remember in freshman year of high school, I did a PowerPoint about a movie that I enjoyed, and I had a song in it and everything.
Nice.
And I got an A+, and now look at me, I'm waiting for it.
It'll come back. It's like riding a bike. All right. Any questions? Does this make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, what are the next 3 chapter tests we're having? What are the chapters and what's the date?
The chapter numbers. I don't know. Gender is 12. Personality, I think, is 11, and perception is 6. Yeah, all over the place. If I remember right. But double check your book. And it depends on what edition you have too. That's why I don't put the chapter
Did
numbers.
we just have it 3 chapters? I thought I saw.
Yeah, our first one was 3 chapters.
Yeah.
Then the next one will be 3 chapters. Each one is going to be 3 chapters.
Did you know what the date?
The next test will be due this Sunday at midnight. Okay? Good? Any other questions? Nope. Okay, we can get out of here. I'll get the exam up tonight and you'll have it until Sunday.
Keto.